Welcome to this presentation about two important concepts: the athlete's customer journey and the event logistics chain. We want to give the athletes optimal opportunities to perform at their best. The way we inform and guide the athletes before and after the race has an impact on their motivation and their ability to perform. In this presentation, we will go through the athlete's customer journey, primarily with examples from WOC 2023, and for each step clarify the special attention areas for the organizer. The ultimate goal of a high-level orienteering event is to deliver fairness and orienteering quality. We want the best orienteers to succeed. Furthermore, we want to promote the athlete's excitement and perception that she or he is participating in a great and important race, and consequently that the spectators will get a similar feeling. When we talk about fairness in this context, we mean creating equal opportunities for all athletes to perform. We do not want athletes to have success just because they were lucky or had the best coach. The big nations have great coaches who protect their athletes from organizer shortcomings in planning and communication. Athletes from smaller nations does not necessarily have the same support. They are hit harder when things are not clear. The event logistics planning is one of the keys to create athlete excitement and to eliminate uncertainties. If this is done well, athletes and coaches will feel inspired. They will relax and concentrate on the race. If not, the uncertainties will promote athlete anxiety and take away their attention from the performance. The event logistics starts when the athletes arrive at the event, and for each race, athletes have activities before and after running the actual course. These activities are in focus in this presentation. From business life, we know the term customer journey. The overall process from the early acquaintance through purchase, delivery, and use of the product or service until it is finally dismissed. The event logistics chain builds on the same concept. We want the athletes to be well informed throughout. Then they have the best possibility to perform. We will now dive deeper into this athlete's customer journey. Each element from the previous page are now placed to the left, and the sub-activities for each element shown to the right. We will take you through these elements and point out what is important to achieve the goal mentioned earlier, that the athletes get the best possibilities to perform at top level, and that they will get the best possible experience from being part of the race. WOC 2023 in Switzerland was a benchmark in the realization of great conditions for the athletes. We will primarily use examples from WOC to illustrate how detailed planning and careful execution led to delivering an excellent customer journey. In some areas, we will also show examples from EOC in Italy and the World Cup Round 2 in Czech Republic. In the following slides, you will find numbers in the headlines. These refer to the chapters in the manuals and the event overview tool in our webpage, where you can find more information. We now dive deeper into the activities in the athlete arrival phase. When the athletes arrive at the event center, they see signs that they will participate in an important event. This contributes to building the team's excitement about the event. They meet clear signs that at the same time introduces the event branding in colors, graphics, and text font. They know they will have to look for these elements throughout the event. The event office and the location of the team officials' meetings are easy to find. Already from the arrival, athletes and coaches feel they are well taken care of. At WOC, event center and accommodation for the teams were in the same place. This is often the case In this case, it is a great idea to give out a map that the teams can use to find their way. In this way, it's also easy to find the routes and know what areas are out of bounds without having to tape. The map may be found in Bulletin 4, then the teams have downloaded the map even before they arrive. The accommodation map helps the teams finding their own accommodation location. And since athletes enjoy socializing, it also helps them to find the locations where the other teams are staying. Note that this idea can also be used if athletes stay in different hotels in the host city. A map showing the hotel locations as well as event center can be developed. When arriving at the accommodation sites, it is clear to the athletes that they have arrived at the event. Roll-ups at the entry and in the lobby tells that a world-class orienteering event is being organized. Apart from increasing the athletes' expectations, this also contributes to build the expectation about the event for other guests and event spectators in the hotel. Next step for the athletes is the participation in the model event. There are two likely concepts. One is to have the model event at walking distance from the event center. The other is to reach it by car. There are different ways to handle this. The signs and the parking and the guidance, of course, is different. In the first case, there is no need to make any kind of signs. Simply the athletes will check the map and they will take their own route to get there. In the other situation, where you go by car, important to have clear parking signs and to have a manned assembly point. Also, the technical model event should, in terms of branding and setup, be as close to the real start, refreshment and finish setups as possible. The athletes want to recognize the setup when they arrive at the actual pre-start. Most events have an interactive Google map showing the location of important places. Of course, the location of the model events, as well as the parking sites and allowed routes, can also be shown here to guide the athletes in an efficient way. These two examples show what information is required in the bulletin number 4 about model events. The rest of the information is found in the maps that have been given out. As can be seen at WOC, the model events were open all week. In this case, it's not realistic to have the assembly area for the model event manned. But in other cases, the model event is open some hours the day before the first race. In this case, a basic arena with a manned information tent should be found in the model event assembly area. We now look at the WOC opening ceremony. When you arrived in the area of the opening, clear signs directed you. In this case, parking was not relevant, but if it had been, clear directions would have been given towards the ceremony site from the parking. Clear welcome signs were found at the site of the ceremony. This way, athletes and spectators feel welcome right from the start. Here, IOF President Leo Haltner gives his opening address. As you can see, the ceremony site and the stage is very well designed, and this contributes to the feeling of being welcome. Before getting to the opening ceremony, detailed planning has been done. Here is one of the drawings made to instruct the builders how to construct the opening ceremony area. Let us now dive deep into the activities on each race day about pre-race activities. As earlier mentioned, this means the transport towards the quarantine, being in the quarantine, being at the pre-start, and finally being at the start. First, we look at the transport towards the quarantine. A Again, information is found in the overall Google map for the event. The picture from the map shows the nearest bus stop as well as the location of the quarantine. In the picture, you can also see information given about the quarantine and transport plan in the bulletin. Short and exact. Apart from showing the locations, also the actual routes from those areas were shown. As you can see here, that even if you chose to use your own car transport, then you would have the parking zone here, and also the route you had to walk to get to the quarantine. Not all athletes and coaches go to quarantine. For those who went straight to the arena, clear directions were given in the bulletin how they could reach the arena without having the risk of being caught in the competition area. Here you can see the possible routes that could be taken to the arena, as well as from the bus stop and the Flims camping. Behind the scene, the organizers made careful planning related to the bus transport and contingency plans in case there would be not enough space in the public buses for the athletes. In this way, it was reassured that all athletes made it safely to the quarantine. Now let us look at the quarantine. The quarantine is important to preserve the fairness, as it is decisive for our sport that the athletes do not know the course before they start. And this gets tougher and tougher to manage with the development of technology and our aim to show the race on internet and TV. This is also a tense time for the athletes, so it's really important that the organizer plans the quarantine carefully, that the layout of the quarantine is clear, and that you have well-informed staff in the quarantines who is capable of answering questions from athletes and coaches. As can be seen from the slide, quarantine can be organized in two different ways. Number one is the simplest. Athletes go themselves to the quarantine at a walking distance from the pre-start. They decide for themselves when to go to the pre-start, but sometimes this is not possible. Maybe the weather is bad and there is no indoor shelter at the pre-start. Maybe the organizer needs to keep the area for the pre-start secret and is thus not willing to inform about the quarantine location. But if possible, this is the easiest solution for all parties. If number one is not possible, number two is used. The athlete check in a remote quarantine, and the organizer take them by bus to the pre-start quarantine. And then from there, they will be able to walk to get to the pre-start. If option 2, the remote quarantine, is used, its detailed layout should be shown in Bulletin 4. Where is check-in? Where are the toilets? Where can you rest? What are the boundaries of the area? Where do the buses leave from? What is the timetable for the transport? How long time will we spend in the bus? In addition, clear signs must show the way. When athletes are nervous before the start, they may not be able to remember all details from the bulletin. Now let us look at the pre-start quarantine. The same requirements about creating clarity applies to the pre-start quarantine. But here, some additional requirements are in place. It must be really clear for the athletes where they can warm up, how they should mark their luggage, where they must place their luggage, how they will find the way to the pre-start. If team officials are allowed to walk from the quarantine to the pre-start and back, then athletes should be allowed to do the same. Otherwise, athletes from small nations with no team officials in the quarantine will get an unfair disadvantage. In sprint competitions, the warm-up map should show the exact boundaries of the warm-up area in the quarantine. This is not so easy with forest, as we want the warm-up map to have the same scale as the competition map. But still you can see in this paper a warm-up map showing the boundaries for the warm-up options around the quarantine. There should always be a warm-up map that can at the same time clarify the boundaries of the quarantined area on the way to the pre-start and be a map for getting the last acquaintance with the terrain before the start. As shown in the map, the area with terrain does not need to be big. It should be stressed that athletes are still in quarantine. The organizers should make reasonable efforts to make sure athletes do not get information from orienteers they happen to meet on the way. The athletes are professionals. They will not seek information that they must not know, but they would get into a difficult situation if some spectators shouts at them, "Remember to check the extreme left route choice on 16 to 17. You do not need a lot of guards, only a few people in organizer's uniform who monitors the route in the time period from the course information has been released until the last starter. Note this neat feature. The so-called coaches map is not the same as the warm-up map for the athletes. Team officials are not allowed in the terrain, and the map gives them also information how to get from the pre-start to the arena and when they are allowed to switch on their mobile phone. When athletes arrive at the pre-start, clear signs are showing the time when it's -4, where is -3, etc. Of course, with clocks also showing the time. This map shows the approximate marked route from the pre-start to the time start and to the start control. Distances in each box is explained in the bulletin and also with signs in the terrain. The athlete is not expected to be able to remember the distances. Clocks in all boxes show the time for the athletes to be calm and able to focus on the race. Here you can see the short information given in the bulletin about what happens in each of the boxes. The time start is placed with a good-looking background. The route to the start point allows the athletes to appear nicely on TV and allows the best athletes enough time to find a good route choice to the first control. Obviously, the terrain selection, map quality, and course quality is the core of orienteering. If these are not in order, the rest does not matter much. However, this is not the subject for this presentation. Only please make sure that your volunteers in the terrain, at mandatory crossings, at refreshment controls, at camera controls and TV controls, behave in a neutral way and do not disturb the athletes. A few words about planning of courses. We often have more than one race from the same arena. This is for cost and logistics reasons, but at the same time we want the athletes to have as much orienteering as possible in new terrain where they have not been running in previous races. At WOC, the overlap of long and relay terrain was partly mitigated, since the long course had a long route choice leg towards the finish area. In this way, the athletes did not get much knowledge of the terrain for the relay. The slide shows how the WOC organizers at an early stage made careful plans about how to use the terrain for the different courses. This map, of course, is highly confidential and should only be shared with key officials in the event. After some of the course, there will often be an arena passage. It's a very spectator-friendly approach so that the athletes punch the last control, both when they start the arena passage and when they actually reach the finish. It's important to remember that the athletes have in most cases not seen the arena, since they are taken straight to quarantine. They may have seen a sketch in the bulletin, but when they arrive, both for the arena passage and when approach the finish, they are at the top of their tension curve. This is why we as organizers must do an additional effort to make the arena passage clear, especially by having a very large sign that makes it really clear where the arena passage goes in one direction and the entry to the finish goes in another. Some may remember a walk relay some years ago when Tove Alexandersen made it all the way to pass the finish line before she realized that she should have taken the other junction. It's us as organizers who must make the signs so clear that there is no way you can be mistaken as a tired athlete. At the walk long distance, there was a very long marked route from the second last control to the last control. This was great for the spectators and an absolutely acceptable solution for the athletes as well. It was only a small part of the course, and they got lots of time to be cheered towards the finish. According to the map, the last control would be reached by following the marked route, but in the picture you can see the gold medal winner Simone Ebersold hesitating. She is in the run-in, but she sees no control. Imagine her despair. Has she passed the control without seeing it? She very quickly realized she had to continue. The control was just around the corner, placed in a great way for the cameras at the run-in. But many athletes were confused, and afterwards everyone agreed that it would have been great to have the control visible from the run-in in the picture. The point is that as organizers, we must always think how the athletes will interpret the conditions when they are at maximum stress just before the end of the race. We now switch to a series of pictures from European Orienteering Championships 2023 to show the finish sequence. In the picture, you can see the finish in the beautiful city of Verona at the sprint distance in EOC. Obviously, the first step after finishing is crossing the finish line. And after finish, the athletes go through a sequence of activities. This is a sensitive sequence for the athletes. Naturally, some athletes will be happy, others disappointed, some will be extremely exhausted, others not. At the same time, we want to give TV viewers and spectators memorable moments. This means that the finish sequence must be carefully planned at the same time as the different officials must be well trained in cooperation with the other stakeholders in the finish area, at the same time be capable to improvise in difficult situations. On one hand, TV should be given time to show exhaustion and emotion. On the other hand, the e-card readout must happen fast to avoid having athletes celebrating a great result for quite a while and then later face a missing punch. This is why athletes should be guided to the readout as soon as possible with respect for the need to recover. In the picture, you can see the entry to the readout tent at the EOC. Here you can see the crew is ready to do a fast readout as soon as possible after the finish. Here it is done at the entry to the tent with IT, problems desk and mixed zone. Another option is to have a volunteer with a portable and then probably also wired readout unit just after the finish. If the athlete is missing a punch or is disqualified for other reasons, she or he should be able to get immediate support from his team official. An exhausted athlete should not be left alone in such a situation. In the picture, you can see the referee table just next to the readout, and also that refreshment is available to the athlete. It was possible to bring athlete and team official to the referee's desk without interfering with the mix zone. In the small video coming up next, you will see Simona Ebersold from Switzerland delivering her GPS unit. Victoria March from Hungary has already delivered, and when they leave the tent, you can in the background see Sarah Hagström from Sweden being interviewed. Sarah started 2 minutes before Simona. In the end of the start field, a lot of things happen, and the crew in the mix zone must be able to act fast at the same time as they show their respect for the athletes' actual conditions.
It was a good start from Hanna, but then she had some troubles. And here's the finish from Hanna Lundberg, Sweden. And into 4th position right now, I believe, from Hanna Lundberg. Right behind Sara Hagström.
Here you can see the interview with Sarah in another part of the tent. And of course the mix zone staff must always be some minutes ahead of the situation. They know what possible interviewers are on site, and they should know when top athletes are on their way to the finish. From this knowledge, they must be able to plan the interview sequence in a way that is easy to manage for the athlete and also for those who are working in the mix zone. The physical layout of the mix zone must be compact to facilitate easy cooperation between key stakeholders and a fast pass-through to mix zone and team zone for those athletes that are not being interviewed. When athletes leave the team zone, it should be possible to meet their team officials unless they have already met them at the problems desk. But not all athletes have team officials waiting for them at the exit. For them, it should be possible to find a very well-marked route going from the mixed zone and into the team zone without having to run through a lot of spectators. We are now back at WOC 2023. The picture shows the arena drawing shown in the bulletin. It informs the athletes and team officials about the overall layout of the arena, where to have the finish and where is the team zone. To find their way, athletes followed clear signs and volunteers from the stage and mix zone to the team zone. It must be easy for the athletes to find their luggage when they arrive in the team zone. From the team zone, it must be easy for the athlete to get access to a cool-down area where they can quietly jog and evaluate their race without being disturbed. Cool-down maps, as shown here, is a great way of informing the athletes where they are allowed to be. Athletes are interested in following the competition after they have finished, changed and jogged. Thus, ideally, the team zone should be placed in such a way that this is possible. The picture shows an example from the World Cup Round 2 in Czech Republic. The eastern side of the run-in was reserved for the athletes, and the left side for the spectators. This is an effective way to give athletes access to watch the competition. The early starters were quarantined in the team zone until the start quarantine closed. This was really nice for the late starters, since they did not have to be in the quarantine as many hours as without an after-finish quarantine. If possible, the after-finish quarantine should then also have access to a jog-down area for the early starters. Before we take the step from team zone to the flower and medal ceremonies, let us stop and talk about the importance of doing a very careful planning of the design of the arena. As mentioned above, the athlete should have a smooth way from finish through mixed zone to team zone and cool down area, but many other stakeholders are relying on the arena. Great view for spectators, good working conditions for volunteers and media, and great TV pictures. The important thing is to make a detailed arena drawing and make sure it is followed. You are not supposed to be able to see the details of the arena drawing from WOC 2023 shown in the slide, but it should give you an idea of the level of detail that professional organizers aim for. When you arrive at the arena as spectator, you should feel welcome and well informed. This can be done with signs or by having an arena drawing at the entrance that you can take a photo from with your phone. This drawing shows the organizer's plan where to place the signs. The flower ceremony takes place a very short time after the competition has ended. The time schedule is extremely tight since it must be held before the end of the TV transmission. A dignified flower ceremony requires a lot of planning. The ceremony leader must be ready, music ready, and athletes must be on site. Very often, it's not possible for the athletes to hear the speaker announcing the ceremony. They may be jogging or elsewhere. Thus, the organizer should appoint a person to follow each of the flower ceremony participating athletes and guide them to the podium in time. The key moments in the ceremony is when to enter the stage and when to leave it again. It is the organizer's responsibility to give clear instructions to athletes as well as those who deliver the flowers. Medal ceremony may be in the arena or it may be at a separate ceremony site after the race, typically in the evening of the race day. Let us first talk about medal ceremony in the arena. First of all, it should be held as soon as possible after the end of the race. For many athletes, the medal ceremony may be a once-in-a-lifetime experience for both them and their teammates and team officials. And it is disappointing to have the ceremony in an empty arena. This calls for careful time planning. In addition, the actual ceremony and its execution should be carefully planned. It's a must that you make a rehearsal with the people involved before you start the ceremony. The national anthem has a special status and should be played with good equipment. If the medal ceremony is in a separate ceremony site after the race, special care should be taken to make it very clear where the ceremony is held and make sure to have many spectators, for example, by having the prize giving for a spectator race just after the ceremony, or by having a popular concert or other event. At WOC 2023, all athletes and many spectators had their accommodation very close to the ceremony site. This was another good reason to have a separate medal ceremony. Like it's the case with a medal ceremony in the arena, it's the responsibility of the organizer to plan in such a way that there will be many spectators at the medal ceremony. If medal ceremony sites is not part of the arena, the logistics such as parking options and means of transport to get there must be made really clear. This slide shows the plan for a ceremony site at WOC 2023. Obviously, it is the same site as was used for the opening ceremony. When the race is finished, the athletes need to get back to their accommodation. In many cases, it's obvious, since their team officials may have brought vehicles or because the athletes will just have to leave the same way they came. But in some cases, the athletes will have gone directly to quarantine and may not have team officials to take them back. Please remember as organizer also to give a clear information to these athletes how they can get back to their vehicles or how they find transport to accommodation. You may have recognized that the slide here shows the same picture as we showed earlier in this presentation. The closing ceremony should always be just after the medal ceremony. From an athlete perspective, this should be short and have athletes in the center. At European Orienteering Championships 2023, the closing was a really relaxed celebration of the teams and athletes that had chosen to end their career. As organizer, you may also have other items like extending your thanks to volunteers, sponsors, partners, or landowners, but always consider if this is the right time for that or if this is better done at another time. At WOC jaywalk, and sometimes the World Cup final, the athletes are happy to have a party at the end of the event. Also for this, clear information should be given. Where is it? When does it start? Will you get food? Can you buy something to drink at reasonable prices? First impressions last. When the athletes have a great experience at the end of the event, it will impact how they think back on the event. Now let us take a step back and take a look of a picture of the slides presented in this customer journey for the athletes. These slides also outlines all the logistics that needs to be in place. This is why we call it both the athlete's customer journey and the event logistics chain. It is strongly recommended to create this series of sketches early in the planning phase of the event. In this way, you will automatically put the athlete in the center, and you will have a strong foundation for sharing with all the different function leads how their work relates to the next step in the chain. Let us briefly revisit the overview. The responsibility for the different elements that form the athlete's customer journey will, in most organizations, be distributed between a number of functional areas. Thus, one role should be dedicated to coordinating the event logistics seen from the athlete's perspective. To some extent, in the same way as the safety officer also has the overall perspective on safety across the teams. The athlete customer journey coordinator role should be a member of the event management team and should be in close contact with the teams producing and placing signs and producing guidance maps, as well as the final editing of Bulletin 4 and team officials' meetings presentations, since these are the areas directly linked to the communication towards the teams. The athlete customer journey coordinator role is responsible for the existence and coordination of all logistic plans as shown in this presentation. In some cases, this role will be part of the duties of the technical event director. Well, we have now reached the final remarks. This presentation was about the athlete's customer journey. But of course, you can develop additional customer journeys for other stakeholder groups. This could be the team officials and the coaches, the spectators inside, the spectators online, the media representatives, maybe the photographers, the volunteers, and the citizens in the area. In all cases, the fundamental question is, what can we do for the stakeholder to experience fairness, quality, and excitement, and to want to come back for the next event? Thank you for listening to this presentation. And it is now time for questions and comments.